Renowned composer, conductor, commentator, and author Rob Kapilow gives greater meaning to Walt Whitman's remark, "To have great poets, there must be great audiences." As Rob puts it, to have great music, there must be great listeners. Through his radio show, What Makes It Great, featured on NPR, and through his books, Rob assists audiences how to articulate the wonder and power of music. Along with Rob Kapilow, Celebrity Series of Boston will pay tribute to composer Harold Arlen, along with musician, songwriter, and producer Michael Winther and Rebecca Luker, renowned Broadway star who has portrayed Winifred in the beloved musical Mary Poppins, Cinderella's fairy godmother, among others. What Makes It Great Over the Rainbow, the Songs of Harold Arlen, will take place on Sunday, November 3rd at New England Conservatory's Jordan Hall. Visit celebrityseries.org for all the details. On the phone with me is Rob Kapilow. Tell me a little about What Makes It Great. How did you come up with that concept?
When I first started right out of college, I got hired at Yale as a professor and a conductor of the symphony there. And for 6 years, conducted all this great classical music, and it was really fun. And then I got this chance to conduct on Broadway. And for 2 foolish months, I tried to do both jobs at the same time. So I'd sort of teach and conduct these Beethoven symphonies and stuff during the day. And then I would go take the train down to New York and conduct 9. It was the Tony Award-winning musical at the time on Broadway. And, going back and forth between those 2 worlds really sort of led me to think of some uncomfortable and unavoidable truths, which is that every single night, millions of people were willing to pay exorbitant sums of money to come and see the show. But most importantly, they got it. You can really feel when an audience gets the musical language of the piece that you're playing or the piece that you're conducting. And it was very clear that audiences got that music. They knew when to clap. They responded to, interesting riffs in the orchestra. They got that music. But then I would go back, conduct this classical music, and there just wasn't this same sense that people actually got it. I mean, there were a few people who spoke the language of classical music as fluently as they spoke the language of Broadway, but it just wasn't this same sense of getting it and sort of going back and forth each day between those 2 worlds, one world where people got it and really responded in their native language, and one world where there was kind of polite applause, really was very thought-provoking, and it made me want to do something about it. And so that was really where the whole idea came from. Interestingly enough, I sort of ran across in Boston at the time a sort of quotation on a message board outside of a church that really sort of crystallized the whole thing and became kind of the sentence that sums up for me what Makes It Great is all about. It was a quote from Walt Whitman, and it said, "To have great poets, there must be great audiences." Or, in my version, to have great music, there must be great listeners. So the whole idea was to create great listeners for great music, and that was really the beginning of the idea.
And I truly understand your point. I do find that sometimes when you're in a classical setting, it's a little more abstract. You don't quite know exactly how the piece works. It is beautiful.
Well, there's so much I should get it or I should understand, and when am I supposed to clap? And a lot of the stuff surrounding classical music has nothing to do with the music itself. So really the idea is to take people inside a piece of music, look at a piece from the inside out, and then get them to hear it with new ears.
And you have a radio show on NPR, and you've written a book about it, What Makes It Great, Short Masterpieces, Great Composers. How did you translate that into the book?
I had never really thought of writing a book. When I started this show, What Makes It Great started as a radio segment, and the idea was if you could change how America listened, to 10 seconds of music a week, you could really create a revolution there. So each week on the radio show, I would only do a short segment, sometimes not more than 15 or 20 seconds of music. I'd do a show on nothing more than the beginning of a heightened quartet, and why is that funny and why is that great. Then I would expand it to full-length evenings where I would take a single piece. That's the kind of thing that Celebrity Series, where you take, just a few short songs or a single piece of music and take it apart. And I'd never really thought of writing a book because there were really basically 2 choices in writing a book for hundreds of years, and both of them were bad. Either you put musical notation into a book, and then 95% of the public cannot read it because they can't read musical notation. And I was very interested in reaching the general public, not scholars. Or you don't put musical notation in a book, and then you're forced to talk about music so generally that it sort of wasn't really worth it for me to write a book. But then it was really sort of the new technical possibilities that made me want to write a book. I've actually written 2 books. The first book before What Makes It Great, which was called All You Have to Do Is Listen, I discovered that what you could do was create a free website where all the musical examples in the book were in notation. You could actually examples, and you would know exactly where you were because of this scroll bar, and I would write on the music the events that were happening. So you were able to translate What Makes It Great into a book form in that first book. You could hear it all. The second book was even better. The What Makes It Great book, that was written right around the time of the iPad.
Okay.
So it's actually the first enhanced ebook about music for the iPad. So even though you can buy a hardcover version with a website like that, on the iPad, all the musical examples are right there on the screen in notation. You touch them, they explode to full screen, and then you can hear them, and they scroll in real time with a scroll bar right there. So even if you can't read a note of music right there on the iPad, you can hear 200 musical examples, know exactly what's going on, see my comments at the moment it happens when the scroll bar passes the music at that moment. So it's a completely new world of possibility for music books, because before then, you just couldn't hear music, and talking about music without being able to hear it is like writing about architecture without being able to see it. In the Harold Arlen show, you start with a single leap in Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And you can look at just what happens to that magic leap, that leap from a low note to a high note, from Kansas to Oz, from the black and white of the film at the beginning to the world where she wants to escape to up in that ethereal head voice of Somewhere. You literally start with a single note, a single leap. You follow out the song note by note. So yeah, you basically get taken inside a piece of music, just sort of like, a football diagram. If you watch something on television and somebody slows down a play, and suddenly you see all those things that you missed when it went by at lightning speed. Because that's one of the hard things about music. It goes by in real time, and so many details flash by in a second that it's really hard if you don't have something like What Makes It Great to slow it down and hear what's going on. But in the book and in these evenings, we get to take it apart, slow it down, put it back together layer by layer, so that when you actually hear the whole piece, and we always perform the entire piece, you've gotten inside it and you know it in a way that otherwise you never could.
And getting into Over the Rainbow, for example, what I find so amazing about that song, and that's another piece written by Harold Arlen, among many, many others, 500 to be exact. What I love about the piece is that it's not a belt sort of a song. It's a very gentle, breezy song that has such great meaning.
Yeah, he calls it a song of yearning. And I think that is what it's about. All of us have in some way yearned to be over the rainbow in some version, to be out of whatever black and white daily reality we're in to some magical place over the rainbow. And it's this wonderful song of yearning. I will say, when we take it apart in the show, you won't believe what happens to that opening leap. That huge leap of an octave, which, by the way, made people not want to even include it in the film because they thought it would be too hard to sing. It's a really big leap, and they thought it would never sell sheet music because it would be too hard to sing. And actually, the producers took this song out of the show in the first previews, and it almost didn't get to be included in the film. I've been doing What Makes It Great, the celebrity series, for 16 years. One of the wonderful things about this, which was just a wonderful coincidence, is that since this is the 75th anniversary of the celebrity series, which was founded in 1938, we were looking for something from 1938, and it just so happens, when was Over the Rainbow written?
Ah, I see where you're going.
So we actually finished the concert with a piece that was written the exact same year that the celebrity series was founded, and it seemed like a perfect match that somehow the celebrity series began its vision in 1938, and so did Harold Arlen Over the Rainbow.
So let's talk a little about Harold Arlen's music. He's done many wonderful songs such as World on a String, Get Happy, Let's Fall in Love, Over the Rainbow. Will your repertoire include some of the best known songs?
Absolutely. We're doing many of the most famous ones, like Stormy Weather. In fact, we start with Get Happy, which is the song that made him famous at the age of 25. The story of how he got involved in that show and that song is sort of an unbelievable Broadway kind of story itself. At the time, he wanted to be a singer, not a songwriter. And he actually had a small singing part in this show. And one day, the dance accompanist got sick, and they asked Arlen to fill in. And he actually describes in his documentary film, he says, mostly song is a standard Broadway legend kind of story. It's interesting, he was the son of a cantor. An introduction, which many people haven't heard, which sort of has a kind of spiritual-like feel. And there are a lot of these Arlen songs with sort of quasi-spiritual beginnings that really, in a way, are his version of his father, who was a cantor, translated into a kind of imitation, spiritual, gospel kind of feel. So that's part of that song, too. We'll be doing Last Night, When We Were Young, that old black magic. So we'll definitely be taking apart a lot of the truly most famous songs. But it's really an amazing experience, even when you've known these songs all your life, known them by heart, to really take them apart slowly and see what actually makes them tick and what makes them great. You will literally hear them in a completely different way after we take them apart than you'd ever heard them before, particularly if you've known them by heart.
The music is timeless, and performers like Michael Bublé and Harry Connick Jr. are among the many artists that have covered these classics from the American Songbook through the years. What do you think it is about the music that speaks to people today?
Well, first of all, the music, it sort of speaks to our hopes, dreams, and fantasies. It's the world that we wish we had. I mean, we all wish we would have a way of going over the rainbow to this magic place, stuck down on what I call low C, daily reality, somehow finding our way up to high C. It's about romance, it's about dreams, it's about hopes. I think that all of us, in our private fantasies have these desires to meet someone and you see them walking across the room and suddenly as in South Pacific. So I do think that the musical theater represents what we all secretly wish and hope for. A song like Get Happy is as exuberant as we ever wish we could be. One of the most beautiful songs that he ever wrote that people don't know, which we'll be doing in the show, is called Last Night When We Were Young.
Oh, I love that song.
Even that title, just think about that. Last Night When We Were Young. Doesn't that touch something so deeply in all of us, that feeling that literally we were young last night and it's suddenly whisked by? I think it tugs at the most profound elemental feelings, hopes, dreams, and emotions that we all have, and it gives us a place to experience them and opens up those emotions in ways that don't normally happen in daily life.
Now, songwriter Michael Winther and Rebecca Luker will also be with you to perform some of these songs. How much Broadway you think is going to be involved in this tribute?
The reason that these singers are doing this program is because they are superb Broadway stars. Michael was in Mamma Mia, and Rebecca's currently in Cinderella and has been in all these shows. These are the best of Broadway singers, and that's why I brought them to do this Broadway music. They're fantastic at getting inside the piece. Also, they do all these musical examples, which are quite hard to do because very often what I do is I write a version of a measure or two that's only slightly different than what Arlen wrote to sort of show you what he wrote that was so special. In other words, I write a kind of ordinary version with boring harmony or less interesting vocal lines, and they have to have the ability to sing the versions that Arlen didn't write to compare them to the versions that he did. So it takes some really extraordinary musicians like Michael and Rebecca not only to just sing and perform the songs beautifully, but to do these short musical examples, which are often just a little bit different than the actual music itself. So they're the perfect Broadway singers for this beautiful Broadway music.
So audience can expect to be enriched by the material. They'll go home with knowledge about how the music is put together and very interactive.
The audience will be doing a lot of the singing as well. But, sometimes just the tiniest differences, I'll take some Over the Rainbow. There's after it goes somewhere over the rainbow, it goes way up high. I will actually play them a simple version that an ordinary composer might have written underneath that, something like this. Nice and cheery, way up high. But then Arlen writes this heart-tugging harmony underneath.
I see.
That's so beautiful. But just hearing that compared to versus, suddenly you notice that harmony underneath or that piano part in a way that you may not have heard, and all the yearning that Dorothy feels is underneath in that harmony. The words are just way up high, but the yearning to be way up high, to be not where you are, to be in some magic place, is all in those beautiful chords underneath. And once it's been pointed out to you, you never hear it the same again.
And what will be so wonderful of the audience members is they'll probably discover quite a few songs that they didn't know that Harold Arlen had written and put together.
Absolutely. He always said that in interviews, the 4 words that seem to define his career, the question that
you think is the best reason people should see this particular tribute? What sets it apart from other productions?
Well, I think, the first thing is that it's, in many cases, music that you've known all your life, but it's music that you haven't known. It's funny. I have a friend who's a famous psychiatrist in New York, and he said to me once that most people know what they know. And he says, some people even are aware enough to know what they don't know, but what's really interesting in life is what you don't know that you don't know. And this is a program about what you don't know about music you've heard all your life. It's hard not to love Get Happy, Over the Rainbow, Stormy Weather, that old black magic. I mean, this is fantastic music, but as I say, it's really about what you don't know you don't know. Really, those songs are so much greater than you've ever known, and that's really what this whole evening is about, taking people inside. They'll be singing, they'll be responding, they'll be doing parts of it, listening to us. The fourth wall gets broken down, and they get to come inside this great music and hear it from the inside out in a way that they've never heard before.
Yeah, it's just like walking into your book.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's right.
What Makes It Great, Over the Rainbow, the songs of Harold Arlen will take place on Sunday, November 3rd at New England Conservatory's Jordan Hall. And this is all part of Celebrity Series of Boston's 75th anniversary. Visit celebrityseries.org for